buy it again? I don't know. Is it worth $1,000? I don't know. Do I like it? I don't know. Carried this thing for a month and I don't know what to say about it. Like, I thought about it every day. No idea. No idea what to say about it. Except for it flicks really well. I have been spending a lot of time out here at the shop. I mean a lot. And I always love coming out here even when I have nothing to be working on. It's just peaceful. I'm kind of often in the woods. You can maybe hear the tree frogs. They also really like it out here, I guess. Maybe someone told them I was coming to shoot a video and they decided to all start singing 5 minutes ago. But regardless, I love coming out here and I'm gonna be spending a lot more time out here than I have previously. I come out here a lot to smoke meats with friends on like Fridays, and we all sit around, smoke cigars, drink whiskey, and eat meat. It's just a lot of fun out here. But I will be out here a lot more working on this. I am almost ready to break ground on it because this is an LS1 swap kit for it. So I'm ready to pull the engine. I have not sourced an LS1 yet, but that's not why we're here. We're here because I have waited sufficiently long enough for no one to care about this anymore. The Grimsmo Norseman that I carried all of January. This is the only knife I carried all of January, and I used it about 95% of the time, probably more than that, probably like 99% of the time. I said when I started this whole thing that I wasn't gonna cheat, and I still don't think I cheated because I did attempt. Anything I cut, I attempted to cut with this first, but really it only came down to food prep. That's where this knife really fell short for me. And that's something I use my knives for a lot. So I know there are a lot of questions that need to be answered about this knife, and I want to answer them. I also have some of my own thoughts that maybe you guys haven't thought of. You probably have. I'm not that intelligent to think of things that nobody else has, but yeah, I think this deserves to have some questions answered about it, and that's what we're gonna do here. I don't really do reviews on this channel, never have. Kind of burned out on reviews years ago, so I try not to do that. But this is gonna be, I think, the closest to a review I've ever done on this channel. So I think for starters, we need to talk about what my Norseman is exactly. This one is somewhat special, not really anymore, but at the time it definitely was. It was a buyer's choice, which means that I chose all of the finishes on this, and not all of these finishes were available on the buyer's choice form. So for full disclosure, I did hit up Sky, who is a mod in my Discord server, to request the double lug, which is not something that was on the form at the time, and the acid stonewash, same deal with that. It was not on the form at the time, but they did make that happen for me. So what we have here is model number or serial number 4102. You can look that up in their archives. But what that's going to tell you is basically this is a green and fleck anodized Starburst 2.0 with bronze anodized hardware, double lug with a CPM 154 blade. So that is something that made this a little bit unique because for a time, Grimsmo switched from RWL 34, which is what they typically use and what they use now, to CPM 154. And the reason for that is because RWL 34 became a little harder to find during the pandemic. So they switched to CPM 154, which is still a very good steel. I actually wish mine were RWL 34, but it's not. So that's all there is to say about what this one is technically in terms of specs. So I think the question that you guys want answered is how was the month with it? So truthfully, when I set out and had that vote, I wanted you guys to choose the Norseman. And no, I didn't pad the votes in any way. I didn't place my own vote. In fact, maybe I did, but I only placed one, and my vote was for the Norseman. I wanted this because I kind of knew how I felt about it already, but I wanted to see how differently I would feel after being forced to carry this thing for a month, no matter what. No matter how tired of it I got, carry it for a month and see if my feelings about it changed. We'll get to that, but I did know going into this that I didn't like the blade shape, and I have carried it off and on a good bit since I first bought it, and I always felt that after a time I'd just get tired of using it because cutting with it is just so weird. Surprisingly, I think I enjoyed carrying it more often than not, and it was less about the knife itself and the reaction that it got to people. I would hand it to people and say this is a $1,000 knife, and just watching the reaction was a lot of fun. People thought I was crazy most of the time. They're like, why would a knife ever be worth $1,000? And there are people in this community who also feel the same. Why spend $1,000 on a knife? What could possibly ever make it worth $1,000? The thing that I really appreciate most about this knife is just the action. It is the best action out of any knife I own, period. Like, super fidgety. It's got a few ways to open it, which makes it even more fidgety. These things are just precision machined. They are the definition of precision machining, and the level of perfectionism that goes into them from the Grimsmo brothers is commendable. It's something that I think anybody who gets their hands on it can appreciate. Even if you don't like the knife, don't want to buy it for yourself, you can appreciate the level of detail that goes into a knife like this. And I've heard a lot of complaints about things like the double tap when you drop the blade, but this one's never done that. I have no issues. Lockup is great. Centering is great. There's no blade play in any direction. This thing is just totally, perfectly rock solid. And another complaint that I've heard a lot about is how thin it is, but I actually really appreciate that. This thing carries really, really well in the pocket. It's huge. It's a big knife. This is not the biggest knife I have, but it is a big knife. But it still carries really, really well. And I think that's because it is so thin. All right, Pete, I know you're watching, so this one's for you. So I think the question that I get the most about the Norseman is, how does it cut? The thing about the Norseman blade, the recurve Tanto, or Tanto, doesn't matter, I'm always gonna say Tanto. The thing about it is that you can't think of this as the tip of your blade. Instead this, the Yakote, or Yokote, the transition between that recurve and Tanto, that is gonna do like 90% of your cutting tasks, and that is really the tip of your knife, which causes some problems for certain cuts. And it is especially good at opening boxes because you can really just stick just that little bit of the edge into the tape and cut really, really precisely. And the recurve itself is actually pretty good for other types of cuts. Specifically, it's very slicey because it's hollow ground, but because it's a recurve, cutting rope and cordage is also very good because it provides that forward pressure naturally as you cut cordage, because the blade curves away from you, so you're naturally getting a little more leverage or forward pressure on cordage as you cut, versus where with like a drop point, you've got to manually kind of go with the knife as you cut. And the tip right here, because it's so thick and stout, has very significant uses as well and benefits. This, like I said, very, very thin behind the edge because it's hollow ground. This is flat ground and it is much more beefy up here. And this is really good for push cuts and for scraping. Honestly, it's very, very good at scraping, but the uses for this are very minimal in the ways that I use a knife, and I really need something with more belly than this, which it really doesn't have any belly unless you want to count the Yokote in this transition area. I think in the end, I can't really get on board with this blade shape just because it does have very good uses and use cases, but they don't really align with how I use a knife. I use a knife for a lot of food prep. This knife is not very good at food prep. Actually, I take that back. It's good for one use case in terms of food prep: sausage. think it's fun and it has some novelty to it and some actual utility, but it is not inherently a utilitarian blade shape, at least not for me. I find myself struggling to perform certain cuts with it, especially like cutting zip ties. Because of this tip here, mainly because this is such a wide or an obtuse angle for the tip of a knife compared to something like this. I mean, you're looking at a much more acute angle on something like a drop point or the on here specifically. So when you're talking about something with a zip tie, you've got to get all of this between. So if you've got a very tight zip tie, you can't get this tip in there. And if you do, it'll cut, but there are use cases where I've really struggled to make cuts with this knife. Whereas with this one, I mean, it's tried and true drop point is just kind of a standard blade shape at this point, and it's one that I prefer over all others. And then there's the topic of sharpening this knife because you've got two different bevels and they're different angles. In fact, the tip here, the Tanto edge, is I think a variable angle. It's not all one angle, and it can be a little more difficult to sharpen, especially if you're using like a clamp and jig. Getting this clamped with certain sharpening systems is a little more difficult, and you do have to sharpen two edges differently. And if you end up rounding this, it will significantly alter how the blade will perform negatively. It's not something you want to do with this knife. Sharpening the recurve, surprisingly, is actually very straightforward. Clamp it and sharpen as you would any other knife, but this Tanto edge does pose some problems, and it's just not something I want to do. When I sharpen a knife, I hate sharpening knives, to be honest, and I don't want to have to sharpen two bevels. I'd prefer just one. So that's one of the reasons I really don't care for Tantos, and one of the reasons that in the end, this blade shape just isn't ever going to do it for me. So through the duration of this whole thing, I asked you guys for a lot of different questions. I wanted to know and make sure that I was answering what you guys wanted to know about this knife. First one, is it me or is the Norseman close to looking like a gas station knife? I guess I could see where you might feel that way, but I don't think so myself. I think if this had a drop point blade, it wouldn't, and you're really just thinking that because of the odd blade shape, but I don't really think it looks like a gas station knife. It looks awkwardly weighing. Is it? No, it's not awkward. It's very balanced in the hand. Feels very comfortable to use. The ergonomics are really good, and it's not very heavy. It's a fairly lightweight knife, and no, I don't think it's weighty or unwieldy in any way. Best comparison to something more production or easily obtainable. If you want something budget friendly, the Civivi Keen Natter is also a recurve Tanto, and I think it's even a little more usable blade shape on the Keen Natter because the blade doesn't end all the way up here. It's a little less dramatic on the Tanto edge. So Keen Natter is the one that comes to mind for me, but there are plenty of other Tantos. Is this challenge easier or harder than expected? I think both, which sounds like a really weird cop-out answer, but easy because getting through it was fine. I found that I didn't want to cut things towards the end. I would just rip Amazon packages open because I just didn't want to pull the knife out. It wasn't an enjoyable experience always having to cut with this. And I did have to grab other knives, especially like food prep. This just could not handle all of the food prep that I do. And I typically use whatever knife I have on me to cut up food for whatever meal. And that's just how it is. And that made this difficult because I couldn't just grab my knife like I normally do and cut the food. It just would tear the food more than cut most of the time. So both. Here's a great question. Are you keeping it? I'm a little undecided. I think I might end up selling it if and only if I can get a RASC in a configuration that I want. Another great question just below that one. Knowing what you know now, would you buy it again? Honestly, yes. Would I buy it and keep it? No. I think it's the same deal. I would buy it to appreciate it and get some hands-on time with it and probably send it on its way, just like I'm doing now, if I had it to do over again, right? I think just in my position and doing what I do, I like to get hands-on with things and see how they are. So yes, but I think I would ultimately come to the same conclusion. This one is not a question. This is just a statement. It says, I'm not a fan of a Tanto blade, but I do like quality. And I think that is exactly where I am. I think that summarizes exactly what I want to say in this video. I want to show you guys all of the different knives that I've carried since this challenge has ended. And it's at this time only been 10 days. By the time you see this, closer to like 15, but 10 days. Bear with me. Are you guys ready for this? I don't even know if you are. We got the Bradford Guardian 3, the Spyderco Nirvana, the Ware Lukas-P, Chris Reeve Umnunzon, Chavez Ultramar 229, Joe Knives number 22, CKF 520, the Quiet Carry Drift Thumb Stud, TRM Shadow, Herman Sting, Tactile Knife Bear, Guardian Tactical Recon 035, American Blade Works Model 1, and the Tactile Knife Rockball. I also cut myself just a second ago. Cool. There's probably one or two more in here that I'm forgetting, but this is how bad it got right after this whole challenge finished. I was carrying multiples every single day. I almost forgot there's also a super secret knife right here that I promised that I wouldn't show you yet. Sorry. And now for the $1,000 question, should you buy a Grimsmo Norseman? And is it worth it? Is it worth $1,000? I think it really depends on you as a buyer. If you can appreciate the level of perfectionism that the Grimsmo brothers exhibit in their products, and the price tag doesn't send you into cardiac arrest, then you already know the answer. But nothing I ever really say or show you is going to convince you that a knife is worth $900 if you don't already feel that way. It's something that you've got to get hands-on experience with to really know and understand, but there is definitely a point of diminishing return with knives, and this is well beyond that point. No one is going to deny that. There's nothing better about this knife in terms of function, performance than any other knife that's, a third of the price or even less, right? You can get a ridiculously good knife. This knife right here, it's a little odd as well. This Joe Knives, this came in yesterday. This is the number 22, designed after a scalpel, $220, and this thing is ridiculously good. It's just made super well. And I think we're seeing a convergence, right? The lower end knives and higher end knives kind of, the gap is getting really slim. And yeah, I understand why this is priced where it is. It's a small firm. They are perfectionists, and it shows in their product. But if you are not convinced already that a knife should be $900 or $600 even, nothing I say will change your mind. For me, I'm glad I did this. I'm glad I carried this knife for a month. It made me realize some things about it. It's not as bad as I originally thought, but it's also not for me. So I can appreciate it. I like Grimsmo as a company. I think they do fantastic work, but the Norseman is just not ever going to be the be-all and end-all knife for me, and I probably don't think it will be for most people. As you can probably already guess, I'm not doing the fixed blade February that I said I was going to do. It's just too difficult for me to carry just one knife. Not because I can't handle it, it's just a hindrance for the work that I do. It's just not feasible to do this every single month for a year. It was a cool idea. Maybe I'll do a couple more months this year, but doing it every month is just not gonna happen. I've got too many things going on, and I've got to be able to use and try different knives. So doing it every month is not gonna happen. And fixed blades, I love them, so I have no problem carrying them. And it's not me, wimping out or anything. It's just, there's too many moving parts right now for me to do this every month. So I wanted a break. I had like 9 new knives from January. So I will be carrying some of those. A lot of, as you saw, I can't carry enough knives right now, but yeah, this was fun. We'll do it again soon, but that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for participating in this, voting, and giving me all these questions, and forcing me to carry this damn thing for an entire month. I think I will be selling it. I'm not 100% sure yet, but if you are interested, go join the Discord, because that's where I will be selling it, in the Discord. So that's it for now. Thank you guys. I will see you in the next video, and until then, carry on. We can do both ways.
Yeah, all right, do it both ways real quick. All right, now do it the other way.
It looks like a fucking
God damn.
I just need some queso to put on the tip.
Fuck.
Are you rolling?
It moved a little. God, you are circumcising the shit out of that sausage.
Oh man, they did not have any good summer sausage. They had no summer sausage actually.
Dangling it in the mouth, sausage just dying.
Get the sausage dangle here. Let me get a good shot of that. There it is. One more time.
Here's a-
Give it to daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.